We are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be doing a recap of NCAA and the NBA because there were a lot of important games that were happening over the weekend. Playoffs are coming around soon for the NBA, and the Elite Eight was going on over the weekend. So might as well go ahead and cover that first because I did cover the Sweet 16 and the rest of the games that were happening on that day. So I might as well go ahead and cover the other games that ended up happening. So on Friday, Tennessee, North Carolina State, Purdue, and Duke ended up advancing to the Elite Eight, and they ended up playing on Sunday, I believe. But we'll go over the teams that ended up playing Saturday first. So UConn beat Illinois 77-52. And so far, UConn has proven to be the most well-rounded team in this entire tournament. And the score wasn't always a blowout, however. The first half ended with a score being 28-23, and then UConn started to turn on the gas. And ended up scoring in the second half 49-29. So a bulk of the scoring for UConn ended up coming in the second half as opposed to coming in the first half. They started out slow, but then after they got into the half and regrouped, they ended up picking it up and they ended up winning the game in the end. They also opened up the second half with a 30-0 run against Illinois. So with this in mind, it sort of proved the notion that this was the best team in the NCAA tournament and the team to beat, because every single one of their games has been a blowout. Every single one of UConn's games, they've won in a blowout, and the score hasn't even been close. So it really just shows how ahead of the game they are compared to everyone else. Not to mention the fact that they've already been there and done this. It just adds onto the impressiveness of this run, because most of the time, teams that have been there, they might feel the pressure of like, oh my God, what happens if we don't end up going farther than we did last year? But so far, that hasn't really affected UConn as much as it has affected other teams. Alabama, they were the surprise going into the end of this weekend. They ended up beating Clemson to advance to the Final Four, and they ended up winning 89-82. I've been on the Roll Tide since they won and advanced to the second round. So if you guys pick them to make it all the way, that's a very good surprise. I mean, I expected them to be good. I expected them to continue being good, but making it past this round over to the Final Four, that is something that I definitely couldn't expect. But I could see it happening. I just didn't really expect it like that, because while I was on the Roll Tide, I did think that maybe their offense would end up sort of hindering a little bit as the rounds progressed, and their lack of defense was going to come back to haunt them. But so far, that hasn't really seemed to be the case. They've been the better offensive team every single night out, and that's what's prevailed them. But going up against UConn and matching up against them in the Final Four, that's going to be a challenge, because now they have to have both a great offense and they have to have a great defense to stop UConn from scoring. And UConn has both of that. So I feel like this is where their road ends. But of all the games that ended up happening, that was not really that much of an upset, in my personal opinion. At least when you look at it in hindsight, or at least from what I was, in my personal opinion. Now, the last game yesterday, Purdue matched up against Tennessee, and they ended up winning 72-66. Purdue has gone a lot farther than they did last year, so I guess last year was sort of like a fluky year for them, which, if you guys paid attention, I wasn't really too high on Purdue making it through into this far in the tournament, but so far they've proven me wrong. Zach Edey ended up scoring 40 points and 16 rebounds, so he was the reason why Purdue ended up making it this far. Very good performance coming in from him, and it's like there's nothing that Tennessee could really do to stop them or to stop Zach in terms of scoring, because it's like he's so much taller than everyone else in college, and it's just like really difficult to overpower him in that end. And they tried to match him in scoring. Dalton Netsch ended the game with 37 points, but it wasn't enough to beat Purdue, and they end up advancing. Now, the big upset that ended up happening was Duke going up against North Carolina State. Now, I didn't expect Duke to make it this far, but I also didn't expect them to lose to an 11th seed to stop them from making it to the Final Four. North Carolina State ended up winning 76-64, and that was a very big shocker for this team. And Duke is usually they don't have Coach K, but still they are a very good basketball team and a very good college organization. And the fact that they ended up losing to a very low seed like this, it really speaks on North Carolina State. Now they're definitely going to get a lot more recognition being an 11th seed and being in the Final Four. That is they should be very proud of what they've done and their accomplishment. So that's a recap of the college side. So now let's go ahead and go to the NBA side, because there were a lot of games that happened over the weekend, and a lot of these games that ended up determining seeding. So I'm gonna skip over the Mavericks and the Houston game, because I'm gonna talk a little bit about that in the fourth segment. So stay tuned for that. The Thunder ended up matching up against the Knicks. Now, it was a very close game. Jalen Brunson scored the go-ahead field goal, but then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander ended up winning the game for OKC in the end off of a buzzer beater, and that was it for the game. They ended up winning 113-112. Brunson ended the game with 30 points, as usual. Josh Hart ended the game with 13 points and 15 rebounds. Miles McBride ended the game with 19 points. And DiVincenzo ended the game with 14 points, and they all played a hefty amount of minutes. So, obviously, they are missing Julius Randle's production on the offensive side of the ball, but hopefully he returns from injury soon before the playoffs start, because I really think that they're going to need Julius Randle for this playoffs. Otherwise, they might not end up making a deep run, and they don't have a chance in beating Boston if they don't have Julius Randle. Now, on the Thunder side, I believe they had already clinched a playoff spot with this win. Yes, they did. They are the first seed, and they look like they're going to either face the Phoenix Suns, the Lakers, the Warriors, Houston, or the Kings. One of those teams is going to be the team that the Thunder plays in the first round. And if they don't play the Lakers, I see them winning in the first round. But if they do play the Lakers, then I think the Lakers have a good chance of beating them, because they've beaten them before in the regular season. The Thunder had no answer for them. So there is a possibility that they end up losing that series and end up going one and done. Because of all the teams that are in the top seed, I feel like the Thunder are the most vulnerable to losing to a much weaker opponent, I guess you could say. So my ceiling for them is making it to the Western Conference Finals. And, well, actually, my ceiling for them is making it all the way to the NBA Finals. And their lowest point is losing in the first round to the Lakers. That's their high point, and that's their low point for me. So I already talked about the Lakers and Nets. If you paid attention to my podcast, the Nets, their season is over. It's done. There's no need to talk about that. And the Lakers, again, their ceiling is Western Conference Finals, because I'm not entirely sure if they're even able to beat the Nuggets if they match up against them. And their low point is losing in the first round of the play-in tournament to the Golden State Warriors or the Houston Rockets. That's their low point. But at this rate, I don't really see the Lakers losing to the Warriors, but it is a possibility that it could happen. So it's still up in the air on that verdict. Now, the Nuggets ended up beating the Cavs 130-101. The Cavs, they still don't have they just got Donovan Mitchell in the lineup, but he ended up scoring only 13 points, so they didn't really have his best, but they still had him, and they ended up getting blown out. Evan Mobley ended the game with 23 points. Garland did not show up in this game whatsoever. Jarrett Allen ended the game with 19 points, and Jokic had a dominant 26, 16, and 18 game. So, again, when he has a triple-double, it's like the team is impossible to beat. KCP ended the game with 22 points. There was also no Jamal Murray, so the fact that they were able to win without a fully healthy squad definitely says something about this team and how much chemistry they have as a whole. So again, their ceiling is championship, and their worst point is losing in the second round. And honestly, I don't even know what team could beat them in the second round. So honestly, their low point could be losing in the Western Conference Finals, or even losing in the NBA Finals. Honestly, you know what? Yeah, that's their low point. It's either win or they lose in the finals. That's going to be the Nuggets and their ceiling, because I really do not think that any team has a single chance in beating the Nuggets in the West. I really don't. But that's my opinion. But we'll see how the rest of the season plays out. The Heat ended up playing the Wizards. The Wizards, obviously, they're not going to make the playoffs, so there's no need to talk about the Wizards side. But the Heat, they are a wild card team. There's a possibility that, like, they can make a deep run despite being a relatively low seed. They've done it before. They could do it again. And a lot of people are sort of relying on playoff Jimmy to do that. So I think with this win, 119 to 107, they have to sort of keep this win and this winning streak alive if they want to have any type of success going into the playoffs. So I think their ceiling is Eastern Conference Finals appearance with Boston, and their lowest point is losing in the play-in to let's just say the 76ers. And they end up playing, honestly, their low point could be losing to the Boston Celtics in the first round. Because the Boston Celtics, they do have a chance of playing the Celtics in the first round if they fall all the way down to the 8th seed. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to play the Bucks in the first round. They almost always play the Bucks in the first round, but I think the Bucks are going to end up beating them in that department as well. So not much hope for the Heat. I mean, they do have a chance to make it competitive, but I don't think they will. Next team on this list, the Clippers ended up beating the Hornets 130 to 118. The Clippers, I sort of have lost the hype, and I'm not on the hype train for the Clippers as I was in the beginning, where like I thought they were the best team. So, I mean, Paul George, he ended up scoring 41 points and tying his the most threes in a game that he's made on the Clippers. He went 8 for 12 from the 3-point line. So, with this in mind, do I think the Clippers are going to make it all the way to the finals? I don't think so, just because like they're the Clippers and they don't really have that culture that the Nuggets have or that any other team in the Western Conference has. I don't see them making it with how they've been playing recently. I don't see them making it farther than the Western Conference Finals. And honestly, I think they're going to lose out in the second round yet again. And if they lose in the second round, that might push Paul George out of the Clippers because they ended up making it farther without Kawhi Leonard than they did with Kawhi Leonard. And that was with Paul George being the number one option, and they're not going to pay Paul George that money. I think that would be enough to push him out. But that is just me, and that's my ceiling and the low point for the Clippers. Now, for the Sixers, we just had news that Joel Embiid could return as soon as tomorrow. They ended up beating the Raptors 135 to 120, but I still don't think that they're going to make it far. Again, their ceiling is making it to the first round and losing in the first round, and their lowest point is losing in the play-in entirely. And depending on what they do is probably going to be dependent on how well Joel Embiid plays. And even so, if with Joel Embiid at 100%, I don't think they can beat the Celtics. Next is the Kings going up against the Jazz. The Kings ended up winning 127 to 106. So really dominant win coming in for the Kings. And they're in the play-in right now. They're a team that really shouldn't be in the play-in because they have a very, very good roster with Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox. Sabonis is in the MVP rankings, so the fact that he wasn't an all-star this year really shows like how bad the media coverage is for the Kings, and they're in the 8th seed right now, and there's a possibility that they could end up losing to either Golden State or the Lakers in the play-in. So I think their lowest point is losing in the play-in, but their highest point is making it to the second round. Or even, it's really difficult because I feel like if they match up against the Denver Nuggets, they have good enough matchups to sort of maybe stop them at some point. But I don't think they will. Like, there's a chance, but I just don't think that they'll meet the pressure because when you're looking at the Nuggets and you're looking at the Kings, the biggest difference maker is experience and playoff experience. The Nuggets have a lot of that. The Kings, they've just made the playoffs and they only made it last year after a 15-year drought. And I feel like they still have to overcome that pressure of not being known as a playoff team. And losing to Golden State last year, I mean, I didn't really see that happening. Like, I knew that the Golden State Warriors last year, they were a great team and they had a chance in beating them, but I didn't think they would end up toppling a 3 seed. But that's my opinion on it. So we'll see how it goes. But I think that that is truly their ceiling. Their ceiling is either a first round, making it out of the first round and making it onto the second round, but a second round exit. And then their lowest point is being a loss in the play in. So that's just my opinions on that. Now, the Timberwolves, they ended up losing this game against the Chicago Bulls, 101 to 109. The Bulls, they're the ninth seed in the play-in, so they do have a chance of making noise. However, I do not think they are good enough to make it to the playoffs and beat any of those teams. I mean, there is a chance they beat the Sixers. On the slim chance that Joel Embiid isn't the same animal that he was in the beginning of the season, there's a chance that they slip into the 8th seed, but they end up losing. So their ceiling is going to be the first round exit, and their low point is losing in the play-in after the first series, like how everyone expects them to. Now, with the Timberwolves, on the other hand, they're third in the standings in the Western Conference. So they were 1, they were 2, then they were 3, and it fluctuates every single time with those teams, but it looks like they're going to be playing the Pelicans in the first round. If Karl-Anthony Towns, I don't know the status on Karl-Anthony Towns. I don't know if he's going to return to the playoffs to help them play, but if he does, then I think their ceiling increases. But as of right now and where their team stands, I think they only make it to the second round, and their low point would be losing in the first round to the Pelicans or maybe even Phoenix. That would be their low point. So it's either they make it to the second round or they don't make it to the second round. That's the team, and that's what I'm expecting of them. Now let's go ahead and look at the rest of the other teams that ended up playing. The Warriors and the Spurs, they played against each other. The final score was 117 to 113 in favor of the Warriors. Now, I don't think the Warriors have what it takes to beat the Lakers, so I think that their highest point is losing in the play-in, and their low point is not even making the play-in and losing that play-in spot to Houston, which it seems like Houston has a very, very good chance in doing so. Even though Houston lost to the Dallas Mavericks recently, and I'm going to talk about them in the next segment, but the Houston Rockets, they've shown that they could be a really good team with Jalen Green, and they showed that they could win a lot of games, but their win streak was ultimately snapped due to Luka Doncic having a great game. He ended the game with 47 and 12, by the way, so breaking that win streak was definitely, it might have stopped the momentum for Houston, which might have been what Golden State needed to keep their play-in hopes alive. But again, this Houston team, they could get it rolling yet again, and this Warriors team, they could end up losing yet again because, Curry, he's not been the same consistent monster that I've seen him in previous seasons, even though he ended this game with 33 points and shot the ball 7 of 15 from 3. Draymond Green ended the game with 21 points and ended the game with 11 assists as well, and also 6 steals, so he was playing very, very good in this game. Also shot 8 of 9 from the field, so who says Draymond Green can't bring value? Klay Thompson ended the game with 13 points, 2 of 8 from 3. He is going to be the downfall of this team. His shooting is going to be the reason why they cannot either make the play-in or they cannot win in the play-in. Mark my words on that one. Now, the Spurs, their season was already done, and now they're really hoping that their only hope is that Victor Wembanyama wins Rookie of the Year, and it looks like he's going to do that almost unanimously. Ended the game with 32 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 steals, also 3 blocks. His defense is astonishing, and it's definitely something that no one expected to be this developed going into the league and this polished. So imagine with more experience in this league, just how much better he is going to be. That is a scary sight for for the Spurs and for the rest of the league. Now, let's see. There were games that happened on Saturday. Now, you guys know what I feel about the Celtics and the Pelicans, but you guys don't know how I feel about the Orlando Magic. Orlando Magic. They ended up winning 118 to 88 against the Memphis Grizzlies. So this Orlando Magic team, they're the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. Now, at this rate, they look to be playing the Knicks in the first round. And I honestly think that is their ceiling. They're they're going to lose in the first round to the Knicks. And that's also their low point because at this point that's sort of like the lowest they could go unless they end up dropping all the way down to the play-in and having to play a bunch of either Miami or the Sixers. But their high point would be losing to the Knicks in the first round of the playoffs, and their low point would be losing to the Celtics in the first round of the playoffs, assuming that they have to drop all the way down to the play-in. But this Magic team, while it is good, I think the New York Knicks are a better team, and they have a lot better chemistry. But that is just me, and not to mention, the media coverage around the Magic is very lackluster. If they so that means that they don't really have much pressure on them. So if they go into the playoffs and now all the pressure is on them and all the lights are on them, maybe they can't handle that pressure because they weren't expected to handle that pressure at all in the regular season. So that might end up playing a toll and in their playoff performance. But that's just me. And so those were all the games that happened over the weekend. And with that, we are out of time for this segment. So now I will go ahead and go into the final segment, which is going to be talking about the MVP ladder and specifically Luka Doncic's chance in winning the MVP, given this win over the Houston Rockets. So I will be right back after this short break.